On today's show, we have part 2 with myself and Ben Ladner talking about the Hawks' upcoming season, the East landscape, and more. All of that's on the way.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1554 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Friday, and this is part 2 of 2 with myself and Ben Ladner. So if you missed part 1, I encourage you to listen to that podcast first to have the whole free-flowing conversation in your ears and eyes. And today's show is also, by the way, brought to you by the folks at Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. Enter the promo code LockedOnNBA for a free water bottle with any purchase at Birddogs. You will not want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you. Also encourage you, as always, make us your first listen each and every day on this podcast. And really, you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And yeah, part 2 of 2 with myself and Ben. Always a fun time talking to Ben. Part 1 should be in your feeds now, and part 2 is coming to you now. It's not even a changing gears. It's kind of similar to this, but I want to talk about the guys who are not Trae, not Dejounte, and not the centers. Like, they have this interesting group of wings and forwards. Bogey, we kind of know what Bogey is. Like, I think Bogey is underrated. Like, he's really good, and he looks healthy. Knock on wood, if you're a Hawks fan, he looked great, and it looked great in the World Cup. Put him to the side. It's everybody else. It's AJ Griffin. It's DeAndre Hunter. I can't believe we're still doing this, but in year 5, the player he's been so far, and the player people think he's been so far nationally, still does not line up. He's not been very good. It's just what it is. But he still has physical tools. He's 6'8", and he's got physical size, and he's not been terrible, is the way I put it. He's not been very good, but he's not been terrible, and it's like he's still under contract, all those things. You have a full season of Saddiq Bey, who I argue was like really, really harmful defensively, but also was awesome offensively. Like, truly, he's the bomber that they hadn't had, and other than Bogey, for a while, and he really unlocked a lot of things offensively. And then Jalen Johnson, the ultimate X-Factor potential guy, who I think Hawks fans are too high on what he already is, but people nationally are too low on what he could be, that kind of thing. And I feel like, for me, I think this year's results are going to be tied heavily to those 4 players. I think that provided you get what I would describe as like average or better production from Trae, Dejounte, and the centers, and maybe Bogey stays healthy-ish. Like, that's obviously pretty broad, but I think the swing on this team, this is not even I don't think it's that controversial, but it's going to be those 4 guys who we don't know that much about in varying degrees. I think Saddiq Bey is the one we kind of know most about. He kind of just is what he is. But how does that strike you as someone who, again, is not covering this team every day, but like, does that make sense as a concept? Because I feel like that's really the unknown on this roster, is the 3s and the 4s and like what it all looks like.
I agree with you. I was actually going to highlight Jalen Johnson as not only the most interesting or one of the most important players on the Hawks, but one of the most interesting players in the whole league to me this year.
Oh, yeah.
Just because I think, like, the way Quin Snyder wants to play, or at least the way I think he wants to play based on how he played in Utah, is like, I don't know that John Collins would have been a great fit with the way he wants to run offense.
I know that he would not have been. And that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why John's not here. And that's both can be true. John Collins is really good, and he doesn't really fit with what Quinn would have wanted at that spot, especially with a non-shooting center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he wants to space the floor, play small. That, like the Jay Crowder type for maybe that's maybe a deep cut for Utah fans from
Jay Crowder. Not Derek. So basically, not what Quinn had originally with Derek Favors. What Quinn moved to with Jay Crowder is kind
of Utah Jay Crowder. That's kind of the archetype I'm thinking here. Just kind of the small ball 4 who can space the floor, have some defensive versatility. I think DeAndre Hunter is going to be tried out in that role, even though historically he's been a 3 and hasn't really held up at the 4 all that well in his career. I think Saddiq Bey is certainly a candidate to do. That's kind of been his role throughout his career.
I think it's going to be his role now too. I think just to spoil. I mean, I keep saying, and for new listeners, I think Bey is going to start at the 4. I think I'm not convinced of that because training camp hasn't happened yet. But if I had to guess right now in September, I think Bey will be the starting 4 on opening night.
But this is why I think Jalen Johnson is so interesting, is because if he could be kind of, I don't think he's going to be the offensive player. Saddiq Bey is definitely not the shooter this year because, I mean, Bey can shoot off the move, off the dribble. Like he's a pretty good shooter when he's shooting the ball well. I don't think Jalen Johnson is at that level, but if he can be like a high 30% 3-point shooter, a guy who can kind of catch and hit shots on the move, maybe a little bit, space the floor, maybe like a poor man's Cam Johnson type of shooter, just like a guy who, like, you're not necessarily running actions for him all the time, but he's big and he has a high release, and obviously he's not as good a shooter as Cam Johnson, but he also offers you just a lot more defensive upside. He's a guy who can rotate over from the weak side and make plays at the rim, a guy who can get in passing lanes and use his length. He's got a lot of good physical tools. I honestly don't have a great feel for how good he is on the ball or like how versatile he is as a switch guy.
I'm laughing because that's one of the questions and one of the things that just for kind of fill your background in here, since you still live here, Ben. Hawks fans have already decided that Jalen Johnson is a lockdown perimeter defender when there's not really any evidence of that. And I'm not saying that he can't do it. It's that Quin finally, in my opinion and many others, finally kind of asked him to do a little bit more of that. Like he was purely a big under Nate. Purely played the 4 all the time, didn't defend on the perimeter. And we saw some really good flashes from him perimeter defensive wise second half of last season. But like, has he ever navigated a screen effectively in his life? I have never seen it. I'm not saying that he can't do it, but you know what I mean? It's a very different, something Glenn is an X's and O's guy talks about a lot more on this, probably eloquently than I do, but like the gap between what he maybe could be defensively and what he's proven to be like as a perimeter defender is one of those things where I'm not entirely sure where that's going to land. Cause he's, it's a different thing. Like when he basically has only been a big as a pro defensively, and we all acknowledge his tools. The tools are incredibly appetizing defensively, but like navigating screens and like playing on the perimeter against guards is just a different game than he's had to play so far.
Yeah. So that'll be a big question mark for him. But I think the overall defensive package could be pretty good and is really appealing. And at his size, if he can shoot the ball, like just that whole blend of skills, kind of what he could be. And again, it's a huge, you called it an X factor earlier. It's just a big question mark. But if he can kind of realize some of that potential that people are seeing, including us, are seeing for him on both ends of the floor, I think that actually kind of changes like the makeup of this Hawks team a little bit and gives them not only insurance if DeAndre Hunter just isn't that good anymore, but also like another guy you can throw in the wing rotation, play him at the 4, play him as a small ball 5, especially if like Capella or Kongwu misses a week or two with an injury. Like he's your backup 5 now. Maybe you can get away with that. I don't know. This is all really theoretical with him, but the skills and the tools there are really interesting. And I think ones that, if fully realized, could really make a difference on this particular team.
Today's show is brought to you by Birddogs. Birddogs is fantastic, bringing fit, comfort, and versatility to the table with their products. I feel great and comfortable in my own skin while wearing all my Birddogs gear, and they have all kinds of things that you might enjoy. Plus, their Birddog stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg. You get that swift look that you're actually seeking when you are looking for the clothes that fit and feel great around you. They fit much better than regular shorts that have been made of that stiff, restricting cotton that everybody hates. Birddogs also fixes that issue by inventing a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but also stretches, give you the slimmer fit without having to sacrifice any of your movement. They also utilize anti-sweat-wicking fabric, keep it cool and dry all day long. Birddogs are functional for any occasion, whether it's a date or playing golf, going out, working out, or just hanging out. In the end, the folks at Birddogs make awesome products, and you're going to want to check them all out in one place. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the promo code LockedOnNBA when you get there at checkout for a free Birddogs water bottle with your order. That is birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free water bottle at checkout. You will not want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. I think they're probably going to need a step forward from a couple of these guys. That includes, obviously Griffin and Johnson are the natural ones because of their age. And growth is not linear. It's important to always keep that in mind. You don't just get a little bit better every year. That's not always how that works. But Johnson was effectively a rookie last year. I know he wasn't one, but he didn't play at all 2 years ago, really. Griffin played a lot last year for a rookie, but was out of rotation at the end of the season. Bogey is not going to play 82 games. I'm pretty confident in that. And when Bogey's not around, they're going to desperately need Griffin. But, having Bey shooting will help. And I think there's also some interesting pairings. Like I've kind of been thinking aloud about The center power forward stuff, like I think Bay with Capella makes so much sense because you kind of need just spacing. I think Jalen and Okongwu make so much sense together. But even at the forward spots, like I think Bay and Hunter kind of make sense together in some respects because Bay's defense is pretty weak, but he's a bomber in a way that Hunter is not. You have decent size at both spots there. And I think when Hunter's not on the court at the 3, I think maybe you try some AJ and Jalen, which they have not really played hardly at all together. But like I think AJ's defensive weaknesses potentially at the 3 are covered a little bit by Johnson at the 4. So like I'm not saying you have to do that, but if you look at the roster, they don't really have a 3 that you love in general. But even if you just say, okay, Hunter's still our 3, which I think is probably going to be what the case is now, the backup 3 is probably AJ. Like I think you might see Jalen defend 3s, but he's going to still play the 4, I think, most of the time. Maybe you see some Jalen and Bay, and I don't care who the 3 is, but like one of them, Jalen becomes the 3 on defense and Bay's the 3 on offense kind of thing. But like, there's just so much uncertainty. And I think that Griffin, while he played mostly the 2 last year, if you look at the lineup data, is going to have to play some 3. There's just not anybody else. I mean, Bogey's kind of a 3-2 at this point. It's interesting. Like I think of Bogey as a 2. I think that every positional grouping you would see would have Bogey listed as a 2. Defensively, he can't move anymore. He really has to defend bigger guys who are slower. So it's like they just don't have perfect position. Nobody does in the modern NBA. I know you know that, but it's not a perfect like positional team, especially when you throw in like their 2 guards, really a point guard. It's a very weird, other than Capella and Trae, everybody's kind of an amalgamation.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think that can be viewed as a strength where they have all of these wings who can fit in different lineup combinations, and especially if they're going to divide Trae and Dejounte's minutes this year, and kind of use Dejounte Murray as the backup point guard again. I think having all of those wings, especially when Murray's off the floor and Trae's kind of the solo pilot of the offense, you want as much defensive versatility and size as you can get, so long as guys like AJ Griffin and Jalen Johnson can move their feet against quicker guys, which I think they've shown signs that maybe they can.
Yeah.
And I think it's Johnson and Griffin in particular. And I hate that I'm complimenting 2 Duke guys on this, but like, to me, they are guys that can kind of break just at times, break the Hawks out of that like stagnant station to station kind of thing we were talking about earlier. Like, I think they play with energy. They play with some verve. They'll make a quick decision. They'll fake a dribble handoff. They'll just kind of like do something every now and again where you're like, whoa, okay, didn't see that coming. And you don't get that didn't see that coming feeling from the Hawks all that often.
It's so true. And like, it's one of those things. I'm trying not to put too much pressure on them, which doesn't matter to them. I'm saying even externally, like, there's a belief with Hawks. I'm sure you're not surprised. Hawks fans have already decided they're both going to be stars, and that's just the way it's going to work. And that's fine. They both have star ups. I think they have star upside. They really do. But I think the Hawks like desperately need at least one of them to be really good. Yeah. And that's unfortunate for 2 guys who were drafted in the mid to late first round. Like, you don't want to have to bank on those guys like being huge breakouts, but they kind of long-term, big picture upside, they kind of need one of those guys to like really pop. And I'm not saying they're not gonna, but need versus want are different there. And I think they kind of need it. Not necessarily this year, but to your point, some flashes of that because they just have they're more dynamic than what the Hawks have had previously.
Which of those 2 guys do you see as more likely to reach that kind of star ceiling?
It's so funny. The way I've put it is, this is kind of boring, but I think that Griffin is more likely to be there and Johnson has higher upside.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think Griffin is and I personally, just the way what I value, I think that the more, and it's not certain, but the certainty, projectability of Griffin at that position as a 2-3 is really valuable to me. And I'm pretty darn confident he's going to be good. Injuries aside, I'm pretty confident AJ Griffin's going to be a good player. Jalen, I think if it all worked, the ceiling is immense there. Just the physical tools of that, the way he can run in transition, the way he can defend. I think potentially like, I think the 5 position defender thing gets thrown around. He might be a literally 4 position, maybe 5 position defender if it all worked. The jokes are out there. Like Hawks fans are talking about like Ben Simmons with a jumper is the one that gets thrown around with. Ben, the LeBron comparison's been made. I'm just going to say that out loud. But no, all joking aside, I think that my broad projection of those guys is AJ is more projectable. I trust it more. But if both guys hit their 99th percentile outcome, I think Johnson would be better, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So we'll see. And this year's interesting because you don't want to, what those guys are going to be 3 years from now is probably not what they're going to be this year. So like we're talking about mostly about this coming season. And that's one of the things to bring it, like those 4 guys, those 2 young guys plus Bay and Hunter, they just got to get production from those spots. And, Collins has been a safe starting power forward for them for multiple seasons. He's been, even last year where he shot the ball terribly, he was a valuable defender and he gave them starter quality performance before. They haven't had a starting caliber, in my opinion. This is not me writing on Hunter. Production-wise on the court, they haven't had a starting caliber 3 this entire run. They just haven't had one. So it's just interesting to see if they can get some combination of those 4 guys to give them more on the whole at the forward spots, because that's kind of, I think, where it swings. I really do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you look just up and down the roster, the most certainty is at the guard and center spots. You said earlier, the center's like the position you worry about the least. You kind of know what.
Yeah, I mean, you got Trae, who I trust. Even when Trae has a kind of a down season, he's still an all-star caliber player like he was last year. And the centers, as long as both of them are healthy, or at least one of them is healthy, I feel good about that spot.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything. I mean, and look, Dejounte's a good player, but there's more uncertainty there with his role and the new coach and all that stuff. And then the 3 and 4 is just one giant question mark.
Yeah.
Ben, I should at least say the name of Wes Matthews, who they signed to a veteran minimum contract.
Oh, yeah, I like Wes Matthews.
Me too. I don't think he's going to play a lot, but I can also
he's really old at this point.
He is, and that's why he's available for the minimum, and I get that. But he's a guy where if you get an injury, you can play Wes Matthews 20 minutes a game, and it's like, it's fine. Even Garrison Matthews is a 2, but I think if you get an injury to Bogey, you could play Garrison Matthews. He's an NBA player. Kobe Buffkin is a rookie. I think he'll probably be bad as a rookie. Most guys are.
Can I ask you how much you think he'll get in the mix?
Well, I think it depends entirely on health. I mean, there's this whole discussion that we will not do 30 minutes on about like Patty Mills is on this team.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume if you get an injury to Trae or Dejounte or foul trouble, you'll see Patty Mills first as the 3rd point guard, because Buffkin, they don't think is a point guard yet. They tried him at Summer League. It didn't really work out that way. But there's that. If you ask me who's a better player right now in an NBA game, Garrison Matthews or Kobe Buffkin, I'd probably say Garrison Matthews.
Yeah.
But also you clearly have incentive to play your first round pick if it comes down to it. So long answer short, I think not very much. But it could be wrong. If you get an injury or 2, like it won't be. I think he'll play more than Jalen Johnson did 2 years ago, and less than AJ Griffin did last year. That's a pretty wide range, but just to kind of give Hawks fans a feeling about that, Jalen didn't really play at all, and I think they'll probably target some ways to get Kobe on the court in back-to-backs. So I think when Bogey rests, for instance, and I would personally rest Bogey pretty liberally during the course of the season. On nights when Bogey's not playing, I think you've got to carve out 12 minutes for Kobe Buffkin. It's just like get him on the court. Anyway,
my co-host John Sauber would give me a lot of grief if I didn't mention Seth Lundy as a potential shooter who could come off the bat. Listen, I'm the messenger here. I just want to pass along the message.
I love John, and I had my friend Bill DeFilippo, who's also a Penn State guy. We talked about Seth Lundy, and I will say among rookies, second round picks in particular, he would be on the higher end of guys who might not kill you in the NBA as rookies, because he can shoot, he can defend it a little bit, he's old, all those things. Today's show is brought to you by DoorDash. If you're anything like me, you might like the convenience of having everything that you actually need sent directly to your door. With DoorDash grocery delivery, you can stock up for the week or order last-minute cravings with convenience. You've already trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites in the past, and now you can get grocery delivery that actually delivers for you. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll be finding the best in your neighborhood, and you're also boosting your local economy with each and every order. You'll get exactly what you ordered, or DoorDash will also make it right for you. Sit back and enjoy quality groceries, just like you pick them out yourself. If you want even more value, you can save all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders if you have a Dash Pass membership. With easy substitutions also right in the app and best-in-class customer support, DoorDash delivers groceries exactly how you want them, and get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to $20 value if you use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off up to $20 with no minimum subtotal and $0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNBA. Don't forget that promo code. It is LOCKEDONNBA, 50% off your first order with DoorDash. Okay, Ben, before I let you get out of here, I have to ask you about the East. So I'm going to make you give a Hawks prediction at the end.
Okay.
But knowing you probably already have this. I want to know kind of your general tiers in the East this year. And caveats, it's September 22nd. We don't know about Harden. We don't know about if Lillard's going to be in Miami. We don't know about Siakam, all those things. But like, we can only go on what we know about, Ben. You can be as broad as you want to on your East tiers, but I'm curious, like kind of where you put things. Has been a lot of change. Even Boston, who's kind of been stable, they changed, made a big change. Milwaukee's Milwaukee, but anyway, I said all that. Where are you kind of thinking sort of the tier breaks are right now, broadly speaking?
Yeah, this is a tough because I'm lower on Milwaukee, Boston, and Philadelphia than, or at least,
well,
like I would expect all of them to take steps back this year. Like I don't know if I'm lower
regular
on them
season wise or overall, because
regular season, I think Boston maybe has given themselves a little bit more ups. I honestly don't know what to make of the Smart for Porzingis swap. Like I'm just gonna have to see that one before I have a real opinion on it.
I completely agree. And just to remind people, Milwaukee won I think it was 7 games more than they should have by the point differential last year. Like they just won a lot of close games, and they're really good still. I feel like, as long as you have to be honest, but they're not winning 58 games again, I don't think. So that's to your point about stepping back.
Right. And like Boston, I think is probably going to take some time to figure out how these new pieces fit together. They won 57 last year. Philly, like we don't even know who's going to be on their team at this point. So it's kind of hard to project any of these teams. Cleveland, I feel pretty good about. They won 51 last year and finished 4th. I could see them finishing 1st because of the way these teams ahead of them might step back. And they kind of know what they are. They have proof of concept in the regular season. They know what works, with that kind of two-headed offensive attack and then the multi-pronged rim protection, defense behind them. I think they're a team that could challenge for the top seed in the East. But again, it's just I don't really know how to make heads or tails. So in the regular season, I might put those same top 4 teams that finished in the top 4 last year in kind of a tier. Maybe Miami gets in there, but at this point, I don't really trust Miami to be good in the regular season.
Okay, so I had a feeling you were going to say that. I agree. I think I trust Cleveland as a regular season entity a lot more than a playoff entity. Which so there's 2 different conversations to be had there. Miami's the exact opposite, where I trust Miami more as a playoff entity than a regular season. But I was screaming about how Miami, I didn't see it last year, and I was correct until the playoffs started, and then they suddenly were. But and again, we're talking around this. If they have Lillard, I could see them getting into that top 4. If they don't, I don't really see it in a regular season. Again, stressing regular season because Jimmy's not going to play 82 games. It's just not going to do it. And if he doesn't play, they're not the same team. Their depth is worse now. I'm not even the biggest Strus and Vincent guy, but those are losses. They got, they got Josh Richardson, I guess, who's helpful, but
he's only ever been good in Miami.
That's true. So anyway, okay. So top 4 is your top 4 again. It seems like Miami's the question mark team.
I think I'll give you another question mark team that I'm actually higher on. I can't believe I'm high on this team going into an NBA season.
Oh no.
But the New York Knicks, I think, are going to be pretty good next year.
They were good. Listen, they were pretty good last year.
They were. I think they could be better next year. I really like their wing rotation. And I'm not the biggest Jalen Brunson or Julius Randle fan in the world, but those guys are definitely good players. And if they play the way that they did last year, this is a good team. I mean, it's just a good, solid basketball team. And again, I think with the uncertainty with Milwaukee, Philly, and Boston, is it crazy? I mean, I wouldn't bet on this, but is it crazy that Cleveland and New York might be the top 2 seeds in the East this year? As everyone else is figuring their stuff out, those 2 teams just know what they are. They play hard. They're solid. They have roster consistency. I mean, is it crazy that they might have the 2 best records in an Eastern Conference where maybe 55 wins gets you the best record?
It's a little crazy, but I see where you're going with that. Just because I think the Knicks might win a lot of games. I similar to Cleveland, but even more stark, I think, than Cleveland. I don't trust the Knicks in the play. This Knicks roster in the playoffs in a playoff environment, I don't think has much upside really whatsoever. But they do have real depth. Mm-hmm. They have a coach that cares about winning regular season games, and has reputation and earned for winning regular season games. And just as a sidebar, I think the Jalen Brunson. Listen, I like Jalen Brunson. I've always liked Jalen Brunson. The Hawks should have drafted Jalen Brunson. I said that on this podcast several years ago before the draft. But some of the stuff I see about Jalen Brunson is we've lost control. People are talking about how he's better than Trae, he's better than Ja.
Yeah, I've seen those.
What are we doing? Anyway, I guess it's just New York, right? He's a member of the Knicks, so he has to be talked about like that. And again, by the way, by all accounts, an awesome guy, really good player. I'm not crapping on Jalen Brunson.
Definitely good, like very good.
He's a good player. But anyway, no, I'm lower on the Knicks than you, it seems like, but I do get it. Like they won 47, 48 games last year. They add Josh Hart for the full season. They should be good. I still, there's part of me that doesn't buy it, honestly. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like the Tibbs has worn out Wilkins. Maybe it's just that I just don't think that they have that much high-end talent, but they do have depth. So not to bring the Hawks back in because it is a Hawks podcast. We just named 6 teams. If you include Miami and New York, that's 6 teams. If the Hawks, which is going to be there, media days a week and a half from now, I'm very sure the stated goal is going to be top 6 in the East. We just named 6 teams.
Yeah.
Are the Hawks better than any of those teams for you?
They could be better than Miami in the regular season. This is the thing. Yep. Like, I know I just said the Knicks could get the number 1 seed, but the Knicks could also get the 7 seed. I mean, I think that's where we are in the East.
Yes.
I feel really good that the 3, I'll just call them the 3 teams that are good in the East. We know who they are: Milwaukee, Boston, and Philly. Those 3 teams, I think, have a pretty high floor. I don't think any of them fall past 5 or 6.
I'm going to save this take for Robbie for depth wise. I don't think Philly has a floor that's that high.
Ooh. Why is that? Just not trusting health of Embiid or Harden?
Well, the Harden thing.
Sure.
If Harden might just, if he's there, he might just not try. We've seen him do this, or he gets traded for very little, which might happen.
Yeah.
And like, I'm maybe a little bit lower on Maxey as a primary guy than other people are. He's good. And yeah, I think you mentioned it. Like, Embiid's been fairly healthy 2 years in a row, and that's good. But that's a team where Milwaukee has a little bit of this as well. But if Embiid misses 30 games, like they might go 10-20 in those 30. Like there's some team, like if Boston misses Tatum for 30 games, they can win.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't think, and at least if Milwaukee's missed Giannis, they've actually been pretty decent without Giannis in the past. If Embiid's not there, Philly's like usually just bad, actually bad. And if you get the combination of Embiid health stuff and Harden either not being there or not being plugged in, I understand why you say that, but my alarm bells are a little bit up with Philly. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, I think certainly if Embiid doesn't stay healthy. Yeah,
which is kind of for every team. We should say that's for every team. I mean, if Trae goes down, the Hawks are going to be pretty bad. I mean, it's all those things. But Embiid has a more documented injury history,
right? And his team is probably less equipped to withstand.
Yeah, they sneaky don't have very much depth, man. Yeah, like they've lost some, even guys like McDaniels, and they lost George Niang. Like they don't. I don't like Philly this year. I found I don't know what it is. Like maybe it's just like everything. Their roster is worse now, even before you take the Harden stuff into account, than it was last year, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I mean, they're definitely the team of that top 3. Really throw Cleveland in there that I'm most worried could just kind of fall.
Agreed.
Like I don't think they'll completely fall out of things. They'll always be there. They'll have
won't be.
But I could see them like falling flat by their standards
and winning
according
45.
to the expectations that they have.
Yeah, winning 45
they might
games.
be most likely to fall short of those, or just to kind of crash and burn by the time the regular season ends.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to get you out of here. So we talked about that's 6 teams plus the Hawks. We talked about. Who is your favorite team we have not mentioned in the who do you like the most? Whether it's Indiana or Orlando, those are kind of the 2 trendy young teams. Chicago's still there. Toronto's still around. Do you like any of those teams?
Well, Indiana and Orlando are I think the clear choices. I don't know how
they're the more fun choices. That's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Chicago and Toronto are very boring.
Orlando, I don't know. I haven't done my full league pass rankings going into the season yet. Orlando's going to be pretty high in those rankings. I'm a real fan of what they've put together there.
They are fun, and Indiana's got Halliburton, who's really fun. Yeah. So,
So I think either of those teams would be really good choices. The Raptors are interesting. The Raptors are just always interesting to me. I can never quit the Raptors and their kind of funky experimental thing that they have going on there. I think really, if I had to pick one, I'd say probably Indiana. I think they and Orlando, like we said, they're the fun choices. I think Indiana has a better chance of being like reasonably good.
Of being good
this year.
I think so too.
Like I think Orlando's still a little ways away from them, just because like Paolo Banchero is he looked good last year for a rookie and kind of it was fine for his role, but is going to be in his second year and probably carrying the primary part of the mantle offensively. And that's just not always a winning formula. Whereas the Pacers have a guy who, like Tyrese Halliburton is an all-star caliber offensive catalyst. They have Miles Turner. They have, a lot of guys who kind of fit in between those bookends, kind of like we were talking about with the Hawks. That's their big question mark. I think the Pacers are not as talented in at those positions, but maybe you kind of know what you have a little bit more, if that makes sense. And I think the Pacers just kind of have two really good players locked in and can kind of fill in the blanks around them in a way that I don't think the Magic can.
This is one of the things that always happens, and I'll be short. Paolo put up big counting stats. He was not particularly good.
No, I didn't think he was a helpful.
Now, again, good for a rookie for sure. He should have won Rookie of the Year. All that. I'm not saying otherwise, but there's always a disconnect between what a rookie is. I think it was the same with Anthony Edwards, and then he actually did make a leap and got better. Mm-hmm. So Paolo might get better, but people talk about he's already done it, and he hasn't quite done it, which is the way that usually works. I mean, they're the more fun team. Chicago just is so painful to me, but they might be okay. Again, Toronto is going to be kind of bad, I feel like, but maybe not. I don't know. If they still have Siakam and he's there, he's a good player, and none of the other teams I don't really care about much.
Well, I mean, I don't think they're in this range, but we haven't said Brooklyn yet. I think Brooklyn's really
they're kind of. I think they're more in the Chicago Toronto weird, but also I wrote their roster down to do over unders, which we haven't recorded yet, but it is a better roster than I kind of thought it was going to be when I wrote it down. I don't know what that means because and they're a team that's truly we don't know because we haven't seen a sample big enough without KD and Kyrie and the team built around the way that it's built. But yeah, they're not bad on paper. They could win 40 games. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Well, and Mikal Bridges is also just a hugely crucial and intriguing player going into next year. If his star turn from the end of last season was real, and some of the stuff he did in the playoffs for the brief amount of time the Nets were in the playoffs, if that's real and he's that kind of guy, that's a completely different player than maybe the Mikal Bridges that I'm assuming the Nets are getting this year. And I know that that's possible that he could get there. I just don't know if I trust what he did last year. But if he can continue that for a full season, and that's just the level of player that he is, I think the Nets might be closer to that top 6 range, that Knicks sort of range that we were talking about, as opposed to being more in that play-in kind of fringe. Could break the top 6 if someone has a surprising fall. I think right now that's where the Nets are. But if he's really good, and if Cam Johnson continues to shoot 45% from 3, and they have all these really good, versatile, intriguing wings, and those guys all come together in a productive way, this might be a safer team than they look like right now.
Makes sense to me. All right, Ben, I pledge to get you out of here in an hour. We're going to do that. But first, where are you stacking the Hawks in this pecking order? I have to nail you down here in late September, which is absurd, of course, and I acknowledge that. But are you thinking 6, 7? That's my guess based on what you've said so far, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, first of all, whatever answer I give here will be my answer forever in perpetuity.
That's the way that works,
regardless of what new information comes to light.
Even if Trae goes down in training camp, you're gonna hold to this for sure. Yeah.
No, regardless of what new information comes to light as the season progresses, this will be my final answer, final prediction for how the Hawks perform this year. I don't know what their over-under line is, but I think they're clearly not a top 6 team in the East as I see it coming into the year. But I think after that, they're kind of on a level playing field with Brooklyn, Miami. I think they're better than Chicago. Really, Brooklyn and Miami are the 2 teams I see kind of in that range. Like I said, the Knicks may not, the Knicks have, I think, the widest range here in the Eastern Conference. So they might be closer to the Hawks level than on that high level that I talked about. I don't think the Hawks have the same kind of regular season upside. So I think they're in that 7, 8, 9 range with those 2 teams that I mentioned. I don't really. I mean, surely there will be one team like Indiana might be the other team that after 3 weeks of the season you're like, okay, yeah, the Pacers are really good. They probably belong in this category. But for now, I think it's Atlanta. I think it's Miami. I think it's Brooklyn. I think and those are the teams that finished 6 through 8 last year, 6 through 9, whatever
There you
the
go.
seeding worked out to be. So I think they're still kind of in that tier together, with maybe the possibility for taking advantage of, a disappointing season by a team above them. But I don't think I can see a likely case that any of those teams is like a clear top 6 team in the East right now.
What I've learned is that you like Brooklyn more than the consensus. That's what I've learned.
I think I do. Yeah, I think I'm coming around on them.
I understand. But people should be checking out Read and React podcast. Is that the best place?
Yeah,
to find you, right?
that's probably the best place to read and react wherever you find your podcasts. Hopefully substantive and in-depth NBA discussion kind of throughout the season. We just did our top 30 players in the NBA going into this year. That was a fun exercise. We got into a lot of, kind of the philosophical ideas of, how roster construction and individual player value is viewed and works to, in the modern NBA. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, as well as if you want to just kind of take issue with my or John Sauber's opinions on which players are good or better than other players, you can do that as well. And we'll have episodes just continuing to release throughout the season, kind of consistently covering the league. So other than that, I'm a little more dormant on the writing side these days, but the podcast is going strong and hope people will tune into that.
Well, thank you, Ben, for being here. As always, please subscribe to this podcast. Check out Read and React. We'll see everybody next time.